Hey everyone. Hi, I'm Matt. So I am recording this video because I have a lot that I wanted to say. Um, I recorded it already, but the audio didn't record, and then the second time the video didn't record. But I got the audio for the second one, so I'm going to um, just play the audio with a picture over it. So just wanted to sort of introduce it that way, um, and introduce myself. Hi, I'm Matt. Without further ado, enjoy my rambling. Hi, everybody. So, uh, my name is Matt. I wanted to jump on here and do a video um, that I've been thinking about doing for a long time. But I was waiting for, a better camera, probably a better microphone. I mean, I have this one, luckily, which is decent. Um, but I just thought that it was taking too long and it just wasn't worth the wait. I don't need anything that fancy ultimately. So, time was getting away. So, I just thought I'd just go ahead and just start this channel um, for the purpose of educating people. Um, well, less educating people than trying to open minds. No, not opening minds. People's minds are either open or not based on their level of consciousness, essentially. Um, their life experiences, the sorts of things that they've experienced will determine, how open they are to new concepts and ideas. Um, but so yeah, I just wanted to jump on here and do a video talking about a lot of things that I wanted to sort of touch base on before I get into the real meat of what this channel is about. So, uh, you know, so my name is Matt. I'm from Nevada, the Reno area specifically. Um, but I now live in southern Utah. But my whole life, I've been interested in things that people typically have a hard time believing. Um, and I get that. I get having a hard time believing those things. But, I've always been interested in magic. If I'm playing a video game and I've always just been drawn to, the wizard character or whatever. I've always, loved things like the idea of telepathy, telekinesis, psychic abilities, aliens, you know, fantasy. I love fantasy stuff. I love Lord of the Rings. It's literally the best. That's a fact, not an opinion. Um, but anyway, so I have a brother who is also interested in a lot in most of these things. Well, all of these things actually. Um, who he's 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 helped to facilitate my own growth. So, I mean, I have a lot of I have a lot to thank him for. Um, it seems like about 2 years ago he started sending me stuff about aliens and ancient stone sites, and he sounded like a lunatic. But you start doing your homework, and things sort of start to add up and sort of make logical sense in spite of the overall uh, craziness of the whole idea that, aliens might have built ancient stone sites. Obviously not all of them, but some of them. And so, I started learning more and more. And then the pandemic hit. The pandemic hit. And he sent me some stuff by a guy named David Wilcock, who has always been in the UFO community, but in the many years that he's done this, he's gotten a lot of contacts in the government and the military, and so he had a lot of inside information, which I found quite compelling. And so he was one of the first people to start talking about, what's really going on with this virus and all that. And that really woke me up a lot, because a lot of the things he was saying just made sense, because I'd noticed things before I heard about him, before I heard any conspiracy theory. I saw the way that people were reacting to this virus, the way the media was portraying this virus as this horrible thing, like it was the Black Plague. But I was looking around and nothing was happening. They're like, oh, 9 people have died, and we're going to have to start social distancing or wearing masks and go into lockdowns. And I'm like, why is everyone losing their minds? Like, you look at the flu numbers or anything else, heart disease or whatever, And so just right off the bat, I could tell that it was too soon for people to have like monetary incentives, like the hospitals, like, oh, we get this much money for, COVID patients, which I didn't even know if a lot of people heard about, but that was definitely a thing. And even before all of that, it seems like they were really pushing for people to be really afraid of this virus. And I'm like, why are we pushing fear? That's ridiculous. So right off the bat, I knew something was up. It was so obvious to me, and a lot of people didn't see it, and I just couldn't figure out why people seemed to object the idea of, reject the idea that there's something behind this virus. It's not just it's not just a regular old pandemic that everyone should, be cautious of. There was obviously ulterior motives, and I could see that right off the bat. And a lot of people could, but not nearly enough people. Anyway, so probably a week before COVID hit the US, I had this dream where I was in the backyard of my parents' previous house, which is a very big house, big yard, big. There was a patio area on the side of the house, and in the dream it was much bigger, and there was a lot of nice patio furniture, and it was like a warm summer night. There were like tiki torches. We were just having a good time talking, and then off in the distance, beyond the mountains, there was this bright flash, and it just lit up the whole sky. It was like an orange, like almost like a fire, but like a nuclear bomb went off, and then I just watched this shockwave just come so fast and just hit us, and then it was just like windy and turbulent and just terrible, and then all of a sudden I was inside the house and I was looking out the window, and it was still terrible outside, but I was fine. And I don't know exactly what that could have meant, but I have the idea in my head, and I don't think I'm far off, that this dream was sort of a vision of the future, which kind of sounds crazy, I know, but I think a lot of people are having these kinds of dreams right now, because COVID hit right after this dream, and I wasn't worried about COVID before this dream or after this dream. I've never been concerned about COVID a day in my life, but clearly big things have happened, and big changes are on the horizon, and I think that's what this dream was about. And then there was the the numbers were massively inflated. And I made another video that showed a number of different ways in which they were inflating the death toll, and you could easily look around and see that they were misattributing deaths left and right. Someone dies in a car accident, and oh well, we tested them and they had COVID in their system, so they died of COVID. So just like everything they could, it was a COVID death, and all the other things that people die from every year, they just dropped this year. It's like a miracle. COVID cured everything else. Uh, so so there were the death counts, and then there was all this information about the treatments for COVID, and people, doctors, and the president, anyone saying anything positive about these treatments were just being censored and ridiculed and threatened, and it didn't make any sense. And then there was the lockdowns, and I'm like, why are we confining ourselves to our homes over something that is less deadly than the flu? You know, and just all of it was so crazy. It made no sense at all. And so when I heard from David Wilcock that the, the the virus was essentially engineered, that there was evidence that it was engineered, and it was all this political reasons and things. It made so much sense. It made so much sense, so much that I didn't understand how anyone could not see that. And so I started doing my own homework. I learned about Bill Gates and his depopulation agenda, which he's been pushing for years, and all this money that he's put into vaccine research. And it was just like, it was obvious. You create a virus, release it, and then you come up with a vaccine, and everybody buys it. And then you're filthy rich. It made perfect sense to me. And I told this to people, and I got a lot of laughs, and I got a lot of scoffs. And I mean, people were nice about it, but that it was clear that I was pretty much alone, at least in my neck of the woods. There are people everywhere who were waking up, but so many people were just not seeing it, and I couldn't understand it. But so it was really good. It was really good to have the internet at that time. It's very comforting. Anyway, so I thought it was a brilliant but sort of obvious scheme. I mean, if you're some of the most powerful people in the world, what do you want more of? Uh, Time with your family? Usually not. No, money and power is what you want. So um, that's what they're after, and so the virus creates so many ways for the rich and powerful to gain more power and more money. Um, so anyway, so I was presenting what I thought was clear logic, and I ended up becoming a conspiracy theorist. Um, and since then, I've just kind of been crazy mad. Um, but us conspiracy theorists, whatever that really means, um, we're not we're not quite what people think we are. People think that we just believe everything we hear, and that's that's just simply not true. If you really pick a conspiracy theorist brain, you'll find that there are a lot of things that we don't believe. Some people believe other things. Some people believe some things. Some people believe other things. But for example, I don't believe that most UFO sightings are legitimate. I don't believe that the Earth is flat. You know, that is a theory that some people still hold these days. Um, or hold again these days, I should say. I don't believe that Elvis or Tupac or Steve Jobs are still alive. I don't believe that the moon landing was staged. I mean, when I, or most people I know who most would consider conspiracy theorists, when we believe a theory, it's because we've done our homework, we have examined all of the evidence, we've weighed the information, and we have come to a logical conclusion using our powers of judgment, um, which may not seem logical to people who are, not in the know, you know. To the uninitiated, yeah, it sounds crazy. I get that. People, I think that we conspiracy theorists don't realize how crazy we sound. We do. We just have more of the information than you or than other people. Um, if we didn't have the information, we'd think it would sound crazy too. But we've done our homework. We have more pieces of the puzzle, and so even though it sounds crazy, logically it makes sense. If that makes sense. Um, so there's a story about Galileo. So Galileo was ridiculed um, by his peers and the Pope and other people because he claimed that, I mean, he took the telescope and he made it better. And then he could see farther and clearer. And he looked at Jupiter and discovered it had moons. Before that point, everybody believed that the sun and planets revolved around the Earth. But then he discovered that there are moons around Jupiter, which sort of goes in the face of everything people believed at the time. And they said, no, you can't believe that. That's heresy. And he wouldn't drop it. So eventually, I mean, he asked them to look in his telescope. And wouldn't you know it, they just refused. Um, all they had to do was look in the telescope. They couldn't even be bothered to do that. And eventually they threw him in prison, where he remained for years. And when he got out, they put him on house arrest for the rest of his life. And in the end, he, of course, was right. And now we all use the heliocentric model. Um, but at the time, that was a crazy conspiracy theory. You know, conspiracy theory, what people call conspiracy theories, is anything that is hard to believe now. It's not actually always a theory about a conspiracy. Anyway, um, you know, they didn't believe him. They said he was crazy. They ruined his life, basically. But he was right. And so conspiracy theories are like this, they sound crazy. They may make no sense established currently as true, but that doesn't mean that they're not true. You know, you just might not have all the information. People need to be more open-minded. There's a guy named Leo Gura who has a YouTube channel, and a website called actualize.org. And on one of his videos is on radical open-mindedness. And it has a test in there that you can take to see if you are actually open-minded. And I think it's a pretty fun test. I think everybody should take it. But just because it sounds crazy doesn't mean it's not true. And that can be applied to a lot of stuff that's going on right now. When this started, I was like, guys, it's obvious that this virus was, engineered for a number of reasons. And, nobody around me seemed to think that was possible for some reason. I don't know. But they woke up. They've woken up. But a lot of people haven't. Too many people haven't. But a great many people have. which I'm very grateful for. But but so if you're unfamiliar with everything going on, there's a the global elite, which consists of bankers and CEOs and politicians and actors and musicians and basically all the rich and powerful. They they're all in bed together, which sounds crazy, but if you think about logically the way that people come into power, the people who are the most driven to come into power are going to be the ones that are more egocentric, self-centered, willing to do whatever to get to the top. So because of the nature of power, it is simply a fact that a higher percentage of people in power will be corrupt. And so, on the surface, it just so happens that all the most powerful people in the world are corrupt. Well, not all of them, but most of them. And yeah, it does sound crazy, but if you think about it logically, there's a reason for that, and it makes sense. So, over at the UN, they came up with this idea, 20 years ago. They call it Agenda 21. And in the US, that's like a crazy conspiracy theory. Like, oh, you believe in Agenda 21. Over in Europe, however, it's not conspiracy theory. Everybody knows about it. It's just a fact. It's just a real thing. And they just see it differently because they got together and they came up with this whole plan of how to make the world a better place. We'll make the world run more smoothly, and it'll be more organized, and we'll be able to sustain humanity better if we make some changes. And they came up with this whole plan, and it affects everything, and it has all of these rules and regulations. And it sounds, the way they word it, like they're just really trying to better the world. But it's not hard to read between the lines and see that it's about control. Just control, control, control. That's all they want. They want to rule the world. And so one way that they've gone about implementing this is this virus. Masks and lockdowns and all this stuff. It's how much can we do just simply by asking? And boy, it's worked. Their psychological warfare has really worked. They started out in ancient Rome. The Illuminati, essentially, started out in ancient Rome. There was so much corruption and evil and terrible, terrible things that they would do to people and children in those days. And when the Roman Empire fell, they a lot of them went to England, and they've been there ever since. And they stayed in Rome. The Vatican is one of their probably their primary spot. They also came to the United States eventually, and they've been at work all of these years, just spreading out like a real pandemic. They're the real pandemic we should be afraid of. A lot of people don't know things that they should be taught in school, like World War II. Both sides were being manipulated, by the deep state. They owned both sides. I mean, at the soldiers, they didn't know. The American people and the Germans, they didn't know. They thought we were fighting each other. But the deep state was pulling strings on both sides. At the top, they were all, in bed together. War makes a lot of money. War does a lot of things that these people want. Henry Ford, he's kind of like thought of like an American hero or something, but he was he was good friends with Hitler. This is not conspiracy theory. This is well documented. He was he was giving guns and ammo and tanks and things like that. I mean, he was supplying them to Germany as well as the U.S. You know, um, and Germany was helping fund him. You know, I mean, there's books written on this. I mean, people who know all of the information well know that this was all true. It's just that's not what we're taught in school. Um, so anyway, after the war, a lot of the scientists were brought into the U.S. The German scientists who were doing terrible experiments on people and things were brought into the U.S. Military and industrial complex, and their research continued. You know, because the military was in the higher echelons, it was corrupt, and they wanted this sort of research for their own operations. So they brought them in, and they said, "Keep up the good work." And so we have things like MK Ultra mind control. You know that it never stopped. I mean, if you do your homework on Project Mockingbird, where the CIA is writing articles and working with companies like Disney to make films for use as psychological warfare. Um, these things never stopped. People just assume that they did because they said, okay, fine, we'll stop. There's no actual record of them closing this project, and so we basically they've just been working all these decades on how to manipulate and mind control, brainwash. And so basically what we have is the world's most powerful people using decades of psychological warfare, the best psychological warfare known on the people. And people think it's not happening because they don't see it. I mean, it's almost laughable. I mean, you just got to do your homework. If it was obvious that they were using psychological warfare on us, brainwashing us, they wouldn't be very good at it. You know, you're not going to learn these things if you don't do your homework. So yeah, it's frustrating trying to explain things to people, and they just don't believe you. This is why people need to do their own homework, and why I'm not going to spoon feed people information. You have to do your own homework if you want to truly believe what's going on. If you want to know the truth, you have to find it for yourself. Because being told the truth, just for whatever reason, it just doesn't get through to people. So, if you want the truth, you have to work for it. Anyway, so they use this virus in so many ways, and they start a race war at the same time, like with George Floyd. It's a total race war that started with Obama, and then the Floyd thing just totally blew it out of the water. I mean, they're just really ramping it up now in 2020. Well, now it's 2021, but divide and conquer. That's their tactic. They've been doing it since the beginning of time, and they've divided people on race. They used religion for a while back there. There were a lot of people trying to get God taken out of the Constitution and things like that, and it's like you don't have to be religious to see that that's our heritage. That's what our country was founded on. You don't need to be offended by somebody talking about God. So, just a lot of trying to divide people in different ways. They've put out all kinds of different information on masks. information on treatments, all kinds of things to try to divide us. And boy, has it worked. I mean, before a decade ago, I never heard anyone ever talking, about Republicans or Democrats like they were the enemy. And now it's like we're at each other's throats all the time. And it's not good. Anyway, so I can't talk too long about politics. I was never that into politics. And that's not what this channel's about. But trying to set the foundation of what this channel's about. What's going on right now is the beginning of so many things that people are going to continue to wake up to over time, I think. But they've used so many things to distract us from the war that's been going on for a while now, a silent war between the deep state and the alliance, which is basically the opposite of the deep state, a group that was formed, I think, during one of the wars, I'm not sure which, to try to take down the deep state. And there was Obamagate that happened, Pizzagate, there's Gatesgate, which is something that I've decided to start saying with this whole virus thing. But, every time one of those things, started to blow up, something happened, like the Floyd riots. Everyone was talking about Obamagate, and then George Floyd got killed. No one's talking about Obamagate anymore. That's how they do it. That's how they distract us. And every time somebody spouts conspiracy theory, everybody laughs at them. They're just helping the deep state. This is what they thrive on. This is what keeps them in power. Our gullibility, our unwillingness to believe that people could be actually doing these things. They love it when we don't believe that. So, anyway. Oh, Wayfair was a big step in the right direction. A lot of people seem to respond to that. So I was very happy about that. And Epstein, a lot of people took notice of that as well. So people are waking up, thankfully. But anyway, so a lot of people were upset by the election because it seems like enough people woke up in time to see what was really going on here. And then the election happened. There was obviously a lot of fraud. People weren't too happy about the results. And then the inauguration happened. A lot of people thought something was going to go down. Nothing went down. A lot of people were upset. And a lot of people honestly lost their faith, unfortunately. But there's so much reason to think that, there's no reason really to worry. They still have the evidence and everything. So anyway, the inauguration, interestingly, there's so much evidence that it was faked. I mean, there's the fact that Trump left in Air Force One, which, a president doesn't leave, an ex-president doesn't leave in Air Force One because he's not the president anymore. He doesn't get Air Force One. Biden came on a private chartered jet. It doesn't make sense. And then the motorcade, Biden's motorcade, was not saluted by the army. They turned their backs to the motorcade, and it wasn't to watch for, threats oncoming, because there wasn't anyone around. And I think there was a big fence outside, just out beyond the army anyway. So the Pentagon, I hear, slammed the door in the faces of Biden's administration when they went there for some information that Trump's people had no trouble getting, which is a possible indication that they don't recognize Biden as a legitimate president. Another piece of evidence of that is the 21 gun salute. Each president gets one, and Biden's 21 gun salute was different. Normally, they shoot cannon fire off every 3 to 5 seconds, but with Biden, it was about every 10 seconds. And if you do your homework, you'll find that they do this for funerals and for foreign dignitaries, which is a good indication that the army does not view him as the president, but as a foreign political party. Also, Charles Flynn, the brother of Michael Flynn. If you kept up on politics decently, you'll know that Michael Flynn is like a massive enemy of Biden and the deep state, and basically the Democratic leaders. They hate his guts. Honestly, they tried to get him in prison. They tried to kill him, I believe, get him killed. And if Biden was legitimately the president, why would he give Michael Flynn's brother a massive promotion? He's now the head of the U.S. Army Pacific and has a bunch of other promotions. That's not something they're going to do to the guy whose brother they absolutely hate. It doesn't make sense. There's other things, like at the inauguration, there was a boy and a girl, I think it was Biden's grandchildren, standing right behind Biden, like right behind Biden. And the camera changed, the angle changed like mid-sentence. I think Biden was doing his swearing in, I think. And they were nowhere to be found, So they were close enough that it wasn't the change of angle or anything like that. They just were there and then they were not there. I mean, watch the videos yourself. And then there's a woman standing right behind Biden when he's got his hand on the Bible. She's in like a blue dress. And then in another shot, she's in a red dress. I've heard that people's shoes change. The weather that day, on all the live footage, it was like bright and sunny. And then on all the independent footage of that day, it was like completely overcast. And it's all around. Just if you watch enough footage, you can see it's not like the angle that you're looking at. The Oval Office. It's Biden in the Oval Office. The wallpaper is like gray and textured. And when Trump's in the Oval Office, the wallpaper is like brownish gold and striped. So different. And there's a film called The American President from 1995, and the wallpaper in the Oval Office set looks just like the wallpaper when Biden is in the Oval Office in those pictures. So it seems quite evident that that there are a lot of things that were done to stage an inauguration. And there's a guy named Charlie Ward who is a financier, I think for governments around the world. And he lives in Europe, and he said he watched the inauguration at 7 a.m. his time, which in DC would have been 1 a.m. But it was supposed to be live. So he says he watched it 10 hours before everybody else. And he was sending it to his friends saying, how is this possible if it's supposed to be live? Shouldn't be on for 10 hours. So if that's true, then it seems fairly clear that it was pre-recorded, which if it was legitimate, it wouldn't need to be. And the Constitution actually states that the inauguration has to be on January 20th at noon, which, so if it was pre-recorded, it would not be legally valid, right? So anyway, there's just so many things, and I could talk for hours. I'm trying to go fast, but anyway, 2020 was a terrible year. I think there's cause to believe that there could be a war next year or this year between China and the UN together against the US. Um, who knows if that'll happen? So, in case it does happen, you're going to want food and water and other things, anything you could possibly need in your house for, 6 months is probably what you want to aim for each person in the family or living in the house. But anyway, uh, besides that, I think 2021 will be a very good year. I have high hopes. There's a lot of reason to believe that a lot of great things are going to happen this year, and in years to come. I don't think the world is going to continue is going to go back to normal. A lot of people, I think, thought after the pandemic the world would go back to normal, but I very much think that the world is not going to go back to normal. It is going to continue to change rapidly in pretty much every way conceivable over the next decade. And there's so much out there about why this is and things like that. But I don't think in a decade that we will be able to look. I think when we look back in a decade, we won't recognize the world. I think it'll be different in every possible way. I don't think we can imagine how different the world is going to be. So, but that's kind of what this channel is about. So, I started this channel not to talk about politics, but to talk about what comes after this pandemic. You know, the changes that I see happening, and we're gonna talk about a lot of things on this channel, and not even I wouldn't call them conspiracy theory. They're not conspiracies. They're things that people have a hard time believing, but they relate to what's going on right now, which is the Great Awakening. You know, as people have come to call it. We'll talk about UFOs. We'll talk about spirituality, um, metaphysics, things like that, universal consciousness, um, all kinds of things. So, yeah, that's basically it. I don't want to talk anyone's ear off, but there is a lot of anticipation by those who are well versed in these sorts of things that I've just mentioned about what's going to be taking place over the next decade on this planet. And this whole pandemic and this political agenda being carried out by both sides. Well, I don't even want to say sides because it's not about Republican versus Democrat. And that should be pretty obvious to people at this point. But yeah. Anyway, so I just wanted to get on here, make a video. I don't want to ramble because I've been told that I do that sometimes. So if you've made it this far, I'm proud of you. Thank you. And I will see you next time.